You gold-digging tramp. I want you gone.
The first thing Emily Carter noticed about the Harrington estate was how quiet it was. Not peaceful, quiet in a way that watched you. The mansion sat on a hill in Greenwich, Connecticut, wrapped in iron gates and trimmed hedges so precise they looked artificial. Marble columns lined the entrance like sentries. Every surface gleamed. Every corner smelled faintly of lemon polish and money. Emily stood just inside the massive front hall, her fingers tightening around the strap of her worn leather handbag. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished marble floor, blonde hair pulled into a neat, low bun, pale blue dress she'd bought on clearance, shoes already scuffed from nervous pacing. She didn't belong here. She'd known that the moment she married Daniel Harrington. And the woman standing across the hall, arms crossed, lips thin with judgment, made sure Emily never forgot it. Margaret Harrington, Daniel's mother, looked like she had been carved from ice and pearls. Her silver blonde hair was always perfect. Her tailored cream suit probably cost more than Emily's entire wardrobe. A string of pearls rested against her collarbone like a badge of superiority. Margaret's eyes swept over Emily slowly, calculating, dismissive. "You're late," she said coolly. Traffic was heavier than usual," Emily replied, forcing a polite smile. Margaret didn't return it. "In this family," Margaret said, "we plan ahead. Being late shows a lack of discipline." Emily nodded, swallowing the familiar lump in her throat. "It won't happen again." Margaret turned away without acknowledging her, heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Behind Margaret, Richard Harrington, Daniel's father, stood silently near the grand staircase. Tall, stern, hands clasped behind his back like a retired general. He watched Emily with polite disinterest, as if she were temporary furniture. Daniel wasn't home yet. He was always not home when his presence mattered. Emily followed Margaret into the formal sitting room, where sunlight poured through towering windows, illuminating crystal chandeliers and antique furniture imported from Europe. Everything screamed wealth, everything screamed control. Margaret gestured toward a chair without looking. Emily sat carefully, folding her hands in her lap. "You've been married to my son for 6 months now," Margaret began, seating herself opposite Emily. "And yet I see no improvement." Emily blinked. "Improvement? In what sense?" Margaret's gaze sharpened. "In you," the words landed like a slap. "You were raised—" Modestly, Margaret continued, "a public school education, a single mother, no social pedigree to speak of." Emily felt her cheeks burn. She'd heard this speech before. Different wording, same poison. "I love Daniel," Emily said softly. "That's all that should matter." Margaret laughed once, short and humorless. "How naive." She leaned forward. "Love does not maintain legacy. Love does not protect wealth. Love does not secure influence." Emily's fingers curled tighter together. "You were a mistake," Margaret said plainly. "A phase Daniel should have outgrown." Emily inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "Then why did you allow the marriage?" Margaret's eyes flicked with annoyance. "Because Daniel insisted," she said, "and because I believed time would correct it." Silence filled the room. Emily's voice trembled despite her effort. "I'm trying my best." Margaret stood abruptly. "Your best is insufficient." She walked toward the window, gazing out at the manicured gardens below. "You don't attend charity events properly. You speak when you should listen. You wear clothing that reflects budget." Margaret turned back, eyes cold. "And worst of all, you fail to understand your place." Emily rose from her seat. "My place is beside my husband." Margaret smiled thinly. "Not in this house." That night, Emily lay awake in the guest bedroom, her bedroom, staring at the ceiling. Daniel had promised they'd move out eventually. Promised, always promised. He came home past midnight, loosening his tie as he entered quietly. "Hey," he whispered. "You awake?" Emily turned toward him. "Your mother called me a mistake today." Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "Emily, she's old-fashioned. Don't take it personally. She tells me I don't belong here." Daniel sat on the edge of the bed. Just ignore her. She'll come around. She won't. Daniel didn't respond. Emily watched him avoid her eyes, and something inside her cracked, just a little. Weeks passed, then months. The cruelty became casual. Margaret corrected Emily in front of staff, criticized her meals, reorganized her belongings without permission. Once, she'd had Emily's clothes removed from the main closet and relocated to a smaller room more appropriate. Richard never intervened. Daniel grew distant. And then, one morning, everything changed. Emily stood in the bathroom, staring at the pregnancy test in her shaking hand. Positive. Her heart raced, not with fear but hope. A baby. Something that was theirs. She imagined telling Daniel, his smile, his arms around her, a new beginning. When she told him that evening, his face went pale. "You're sure?" he asked. "Yes," Emily said, smiling through tears. "We're having a baby." Daniel hugged her, but stiffly. "We need to be careful," he said. "Careful," Emily frowned. "My parents, they won't take this well." Emily's smile faded. "They'll have to accept it." Daniel said nothing. Margaret found out 2 days later. Emily was summoned to the sitting room again. Margaret didn't sit this time. "You trapped my son," she said flatly. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. "That's not true." Margaret's eyes flicked to Emily's stomach with open disgust. "You think a child will secure your place here?" Margaret asked. "How embarrassing." Emily's voice shook. "This is your grandchild." Margaret stepped closer. "No, this is leverage." Emily stood her ground, though her knees trembled. "I won't let you poison this," Emily said. "I'm his wife." Margaret's face hardened, not for long. That night, Emily packed a small suitcase, just in case. She didn't know how soon she would need it. She didn't know how cruel the next morning would be, but the house was already preparing to erase her. The morning Emily was cast out began like any other. Too quiet. The Harrington estate always had a rhythm, soft footsteps of staff, the distant hum of gardeners, the faint clink of china in the kitchen. That morning it felt staged. Empty, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Emily woke with nausea curling in her stomach, one hand resting instinctively over her lower abdomen. The baby. She closed her eyes, breathing slowly until the wave passed. She smiled faintly. "For you," she thought, "I'll endure this for you." She dressed carefully in a soft beige sweater and jeans, simple, modest. No jewelry, no makeup beyond a touch of concealer to hide the shadows under her eyes. She had learned that looking too confident irritated Margaret just as much as looking weak. When Emily stepped into the hallway, a housekeeper avoided her gaze. That was new. Emily descended the grand staircase, her fingers trailing along the carved banister. Halfway down, she noticed 2 unfamiliar men standing near the front door. Suits, dark, professional. Her heart skipped. In the sitting room, Margaret waited. Richard stood beside her. Daniel was not there. "Sit," Margaret said. Emily remained standing. "Where's Daniel?" Margaret ignored the question. "We need to address an issue," Margaret said calmly. "One that has become unavoidable." Emily folded her arms protectively over her stomach. "This is about the baby, isn't it?" Margaret smiled thinly. "Everything is about consequences." Emily's voice rose despite herself. "It's your grandchild." Margaret's eyes hardened. "It is an inconvenience." Richard finally spoke. "Emily, this arrangement is no longer sustainable." Emily turned to him, desperation flickering in her eyes. "Richard, please. I've done nothing wrong. You married into a family you don't understand," he said evenly. "And now you're creating complications." Emily shook her head slowly. "You don't get to decide this." Margaret stepped forward. "Oh, but we do." She gestured sharply toward the men by the door. "These gentlemen are here to ensure a smooth transition." Emily's breath caught. "Transition?" Margaret picked up a folder from the table and tossed it toward Emily. Papers spilled onto the rug. Divorce documents, an envelope, a check. Emily stared at them, frozen. You'll sign, Margaret said. You'll leave quietly. And you'll take what we're offering. Emily's hands trembled as she bent to pick up the papers. This says, misconduct, Emily whispered. It says whatever it needs to say, Margaret replied. Affairs, emotional instability, a liability to the Harrington name. Emily looked up, tears burning her eyes. This is a lie, Margaret shrugged. Truth is flexible when money is involved. Emily's voice broke. Daniel wouldn't allow this. Margaret's lips curved slightly. Daniel has already agreed. The room spun. Emily staggered back, gripping the arm of a chair. No, she whispered. You're lying. Margaret slid a phone across the table. A text message glowed on the screen. Mom, do what you think is best. I can't deal with this right now. Emily felt something inside her shatter. She pressed a hand to her mouth as a sob escaped. You didn't even let me speak to him, Emily said hoarsely. He made his choice, Margaret said coolly. Now you make yours. Emily straightened slowly. Her eyes lifted, not broken but burning. I won't take your money, she said. Margaret raised an eyebrow. You will, Emily shook her head. I won't sign lies. Margaret's voice dropped, sharp as glass. Then you'll leave with nothing. Emily swallowed. Richard nodded toward the men at the door. Escort her. The guards stepped forward. Emily backed away. You can't do this. I'm pregnant. Margaret's gaze flicked to Emily's stomach with disdain. That was your mistake. Emily felt hands take her suitcase from the hallway, the one she had packed weeks ago. Her legs trembled as she was led through the front doors. Staff lined the hall. Some stared, some looked away. No one spoke. The cold air hit her like a slap as she stepped onto the front steps. The massive iron gates loomed in the distance. Margaret followed her outside. One more thing, Margaret said. Emily turned back. Margaret handed her the envelope. The check, Margaret said. For the child. Take it. Disappear. Emily stared at it. Then slowly, she tore it in half. Margaret's eyes widened, just slightly. I don't want your blood money, Emily said quietly. My child will never beg from you. She dropped the pieces at Margaret's feet. For the first time, Margaret looked unsettled. Emily turned away. The gates opened and closed behind her. She stood alone on the roadside, clutching her bag, tears streaming freely now. A passing car slowed. Ma'am, are you okay? The driver called. Emily nodded weakly. She looked back once. The Harrington mansion stood tall, untouched, gleaming. Like she had never existed. She placed a hand over her belly. I'm sorry, she whispered. I promise. I'll protect you. And with nowhere else to go, Emily Carter walked away from the only home she had known, and into a future no one had prepared her for. Emily walked for nearly an hour before the pain in her feet forced her to stop. The road beyond the Harrington estate was nothing like the manicured driveway she had left behind. The sidewalks were cracked. The air smelled of exhaust and damp leaves. People passed her without a second glance, each of them wrapped in their own problems, unaware that her entire life had just collapsed behind her. She sat on a bus stop bench, lowering her suitcase beside her. Her hands shook as she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. No missed calls, no messages. Daniel's name stared back at her from the contact list like a ghost. She typed, deleted, typed again. Please talk to me. I need you. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she turned the phone off. Tears slid down her cheeks, not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet, unstoppable grief. She had nowhere to go. Her mother had passed away 3 years earlier. Her small apartment in Brooklyn had been given up after the wedding. The few friends she had lost touch with when she moved into the Harrington estate. She was 26 years old, pregnant, and alone. A bus hissed to a stop in front of her. Last stop, the driver said gently. You getting on? Emily nodded, wiping her face quickly. She paid with the last cash she had in her wallet and sat near the back, clutching her bag like it might disappear. The city rolled by outside the window. Luxury faded into ordinary. Ordinary faded into struggling, She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stop moving. The women's shelter smelled like disinfectant and instant coffee. The sign on the door read, "Haven House, temporary housing for women in crisis." Emily hesitated before stepping inside. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes looked up from the desk. "Hi," she said warmly. "How can we help you?" Emily opened her mouth, and everything came out at once. Her words tumbled over each other. Marriage, family, pregnant, thrown out. The woman listened without interruption. "My name's Linda," she said when Emily finally stopped, breathless. "You're safe here. Safe." The word hit Emily harder than any insult ever had. Emily broke down. That night, Emily slept in a narrow bed beneath a thin blanket. The room was shared with two other women, one older, one barely more than a teenager. Both carried their own scars. Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her stomach fluttered, not sickness, movement. She froze, a soft, unmistakable sensation, like a ripple beneath her skin. Her breath caught. "Did you feel that?" she whispered. Of course, no one answered. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were different, hopeful. Weeks passed. Emily found a small job at a local diner. The owner, Mrs. Alvarez, didn't ask too many questions, just gave her an apron and a chance. "You work hard," Mrs. Alvarez said one evening. "That counts." Emily worked through exhaustion, through morning sickness, through aching feet. Every dollar she earned went into a small envelope hidden beneath her mattress. Her belly began to show. Strangers smiled at her now. Some offered seats, some offered advice. No one knew who she had been, and slowly Emily stopped caring. One night, a violent storm rattled the shelter windows. Thunder cracked so loudly it shook the walls. Emily clutched her stomach as pain bloomed suddenly, sharp, terrifying. "No, no, please," she whispered. Linda rushed her to the hospital. Hours blurred together. Doctors spoke in calm voices that couldn't hide concern. "Preterm contractions," one said. "We need to monitor closely." Emily lay in the hospital bed, staring at the machines. "I can't lose this baby," she whispered. A nurse squeezed her hand. "You're not alone." In the early hours of the morning, as rain lashed against the windows, the pain stopped. The baby's heartbeat remained strong, steady, unusually steady. One doctor frowned at the monitor. "That's impressive," he murmured. "What?" Emily asked weakly. "This baby," he said. "Strong vitals, very responsive, almost like—" He stopped himself. "Like what?" Emily asked. He shook his head. "Probably nothing." But he looked back at the screen again. Months later, on a quiet autumn morning, Emily gave birth. A boy. Perfect. When the nurse placed him in her arms, something extraordinary happened. The baby opened his eyes, wide, alert, focused, not the unfocused gaze of a newborn. He looked at her. Emily gasped softly. "Hi," she whispered. The baby wrapped his tiny fingers around hers with surprising strength. The doctor noted it in the chart. "Unusually strong grip," he said. "Exceptional responsiveness." Emily didn't care about the words. She pressed her forehead to her son's. "My name is Ethan," she whispered. "And I'll never let anyone hurt you." Outside, the world moved on. The Harringtons hosted galas. Daniel married another woman. Margaret told herself the problem had been erased. She was wrong, because somewhere in a small apartment far from mansions and marble floors, a boy with Harrington blood and something more in his eyes had just entered the world. And one day, they would feel it. Ethan Harrington spoke his first word at 9 months. Not mama, not dada. Light. Emily froze mid-step, laundry basket in her arms, staring at her son as he sat on the floor of their small apartment in New Haven. Sunlight streamed through the window, dust particles dancing in the air. Ethan pointed directly at the beam of light cutting across the room. "Light," he repeated, clear as day. Emily's heart pounded. That's right," she whispered. Linda, who was visiting that afternoon, laughed nervously. Some kids talk early, but Emily knew. From the beginning, Ethan had been different. He watched more than he cried. He listened. He absorbed. His eyes followed patterns, shadows on walls, people's expressions, the rise and fall of voices. He reacted to tension before words were spoken. By 2, he was reading simple words. By 3, he was asking questions that made adults uncomfortable. Why do people pretend to be kind when they're not? He asked once, stirring his cereal thoughtfully. Emily swallowed. Sometimes people are afraid to be honest. Ethan nodded slowly. Fear makes people cruel. Emily stared at him. No child should understand that so clearly. Life was still hard, but it was theirs. Emily worked during the day and took online classes at night. Business administration, accounting. Skills she had once dismissed as boring, now lifelines. She didn't talk about the Harringtons. She didn't talk about Daniel. But sometimes, late at night, when Ethan slept curled against her side, Emily allowed herself to remember. The mansion, the marble floors, the way Margaret had looked at her like something disposable. Emily never cried anymore. She planned. When Ethan was 5, his kindergarten teacher requested a meeting. Emily sat in the tiny chair across from Miss Reynolds, hands folded tightly. Ethan is exceptional, Miss Reynolds said carefully. Emily braced herself. He's not disruptive, is he? No, quite the opposite, the teacher smiled. He notices everything, emotional cues, logical inconsistencies. He mediates arguments between other children. Emily frowned. That doesn't sound like a problem. Miss Reynolds hesitated. It is when a 5-year-old tells another child, your anger isn't about the toy, it's about feeling ignored at home. Emily closed her eyes briefly. I've never seen emotional intelligence like this, Miss Reynolds continued. Has he been evaluated? Emily shook her head. I didn't want him labeled. Miss Reynolds nodded. I understand, but he's operating years ahead. That night Emily watched Ethan sleep. He looked peaceful, innocent. But beneath that calm she sensed something powerful forming, like a river beneath ice. Across the country, the Harrington name still dominated headlines. Harrington Global expands into AI and biotech. Richard Harrington named one of America's most powerful men. Daniel's face appeared in articles now, older, harder. Married to Sophia Whitmore, daughter of another elite dynasty. Emily saw one headline by accident at a grocery store. She didn't stop walking, but fate had not stopped watching her. On Ethan's 7th birthday, Emily received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a single card. Emily Carter. Your son deserves to know where he comes from. Her hands went cold. She read it again and again. No signature, no explanation. She burned the card that night, but she couldn't burn the truth. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, drawing quietly. Mom? He asked without looking up. Yes, sweetheart. Do I have a father? The question landed softly, but it shattered something deep inside her. Emily knelt beside him. Yes, she said honestly. Is he alive? Yes. Ethan nodded, considering. Does he think about me? Emily hesitated. I don't know, she said. Ethan looked up then, eyes too knowing for a child. He will, he said calmly. People always feel what they try to bury. Emily felt a chill crawl up her spine. That night, Emily logged into her old email account. Hundreds of unread messages from years ago. One new email sat at the top from an unknown sender. Subject: Harrington Estate Records. Confidential. Emily's pulse thundered. She didn't open it. Not yet. But somewhere far away, in a mansion that once rejected her, the past had begun knocking, and this time, it wasn't asking for permission. The crisp winter air bit at Emily's cheeks as she walked home from the diner. Ethan skipped beside her, bundled in a bright red scarf that contrasted sharply with the gray city streets. Emily's mind wasn't on the cold. It was on the envelope she had received last month, the one with the confidential Harrington estate records. She had tried to ignore it, burn it, forget it. But somehow the feeling of being watched had grown too strong to dismiss. Ethan tugged her sleeve. Mom, the man behind the coffee shop is looking at us again. Emily's eyes followed his small finger. Sure enough, across the street, a tall man in a dark coat was standing motionless, sipping coffee and staring. Not just a glance, staring. The way someone studies a puzzle. She whispered, "Ethan, stay close to me, okay?" Ethan nodded solemnly, his tiny fingers gripping hers like an anchor. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Ethan lay beside her, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling. "Mom," he said softly, "I saw them again." Emily raised herself on her elbow. "Saw who, sweetheart?" "The people from the coffee shop, the tall man. He watches like he knows something." Emily hugged him. "We're safe here, Ethan. Nothing can hurt us." But even as she said it, a cold shiver ran down her spine. The next morning, Emily decided to investigate. She returned to the coffee shop. Sure enough, the same man sat in the corner reading a newspaper. Only now Emily noticed the gold cufflinks gleaming in the dim light. Harrington family crest. Her heart sank. She left immediately, but the encounter gnawed at her. They know where we are. They've been watching her son. Days turned into weeks. Emily's sense of caution sharpened into something almost instinctive. She noticed cars parked longer than necessary, delivery men who lingered, and once, at the supermarket, a woman with platinum hair watching Ethan closely. It wasn't fear anymore, it was preparation. Ethan's awareness grew too. He began pointing out people she didn't notice, reading faces with uncanny accuracy, and even avoiding dangers before they happened. One evening, Emily watched him. A group of older children were pushing a younger boy. Before Emily could intervene, Ethan approached calmly. "Stop," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight. The bullies froze, uneasy. Ethan continued, "Your anger isn't about the toy, it's because you're scared someone will ignore you. That's not fair, is it?" The bullies backed away, bewildered. Emily's jaw dropped. Her son, her little boy, was extraordinary. That winter, Emily started keeping journals, documenting every unusual incident. She called it Ethan's records. He knew people's emotions before they spoke. He predicted small accidents before they happened. He remembered things he had never been told. It frightened Emily, but also gave her hope. Maybe this is why we survived, she thought. Maybe he is the reason we will return. Meanwhile, far away in Greenwich, Margaret Harrington sat in her study, gold-encrusted pen in hand. She stared at her own reflection in the polished mahogany desk. "They're still alive," she whispered. "And the boy, he's extraordinary." Richard Harrington, pacing behind her, shook his head. "Do we intervene?" Margaret's eyes gleamed. "No. Let her grow comfortable. Let them think they're safe, and when the time comes, we'll see what power truly belongs to us." The Harringtons had not forgotten Emily or her child. But they didn't yet know Ethan wasn't ordinary, and the boy had already begun watching them back. Winter faded. Snow melted into early spring. Emily and Ethan grew closer than ever, surviving not just on love and courage, but on the bond of shared struggle. Ethan began talking about things he shouldn't know. He described rooms he had never been in, voices he had never heard, and events he couldn't have witnessed. Emily's heart raced. "He's seeing them," she whispered one night. Ethan smiled faintly, rubbing her arm. "Mom, I know they're out there, but I'm ready." Emily swallowed hard. "Ready for what, Ethan?" "The day they come back." Spring in New Haven brought a tentative warmth, but Emily didn't relax. The city felt smaller now, like every corner hid eyes. Every stranger's glance made her flinch. Ethan walked beside her, skipping lightly, backpack slung over one shoulder. He had grown taller, more aware, and strangely quiet, observing everything, storing every detail in his mind. Emily's phone buzzed on her purse. A message notification from an unknown number. "We know where you are. Leave Ethan out of this. Or else..." Her hands shook as she dropped the phone into her bag. Ethan noticed immediately. "Mom," he said softly, "it's them." Emily swallowed. "I won't let them scare us." Ethan tilted his head. We need to be ready. Meanwhile, Greenwich, Harrington Estate. Margaret Harrington and Richard sat in the study, surrounded by monitors displaying security camera feeds and social media profiles. "It's been too long," Richard said, frowning. "We let them disappear too easily." Margaret's eyes gleamed coldly. "They've grown comfortable. The boy is unusual. But that's exactly why we wait." Richard leaned closer. "You're certain?" Margaret tapped a folder. Photos, emails, hospital records, all meticulously collected. "I know everything about them," she said. "Their apartment, their routines, their friends. And Ethan, he's more aware than we expected." Richard glanced at her, unease in his sharp gaze. "Do we involve Daniel?" Margaret shook her head. "Not yet. Let him live his convenient life with Sophia. This is our family problem now. The Harringtons were planning, and the first moves would be subtle, invisible, but calculated." Back in New Haven, Emily noticed Ethan's growing awareness. At the diner one evening, a stranger lingered too long near the parking lot. Ethan tugged her sleeve. "Mom, he's watching the door again." Emily squinted. The man was tall, well-built, wearing an expensive coat, sunglasses even though it was dusk. He didn't move, just observed. Emily felt a cold wave of fear, but Ethan's hand on hers was steady. "He can't see us if we move carefully," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "They can see everything, but they don't know me." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" Ethan's eyes were intense. "I notice patterns. I know when they come. I know when they leave. I can prepare." Emily's heart swelled with a mix of fear and pride. Her son, just 8, was already thinking like a strategist. That night, Emily sat in Ethan's room, going through the envelope she had hidden for months. Confidential Harrington records, financial statements, family trees, anything she could use if confrontation came. Ethan lay on his bed, legs crossed, flipping through a small notebook. "I know their weaknesses," he said casually. "They trust Daniel too much. They underestimate me. They think I'm just a kid." Emily froze. "You're not a kid, Ethan. You're extraordinary." Ethan shrugged. "I just notice things others don't." Margaret across the state watched another feed. The man in the diner had failed to make Emily react. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "She's alert," she murmured. "But the boy, he's the key. We need him." Richard frowned. "Do we escalate now?" Margaret shook her head. "No, patience. The boy will reveal himself in time. And when he does," her gaze hardened, "we'll take everything back." The following weeks were a tense game. Emily and Ethan moved subtly, different stores, different routes, quiet dinners. Every day was careful, every stranger a potential threat. Yet Ethan thrived. His abilities sharpened. He could sense footsteps before they reached the apartment. He knew strangers' intentions with terrifying accuracy. And he never, ever alerted anyone unnecessarily. Emily began to understand one thing clearly. Her son was not just her protection, he was their reckoning. And far away, the Harringtons were beginning to notice that the child they had underestimated might be more dangerous than anything money could control. It was an ordinary Thursday in New Haven. Emily was closing the diner after her evening shift, tired but careful. Ethan walked beside her, his small backpack slung over one shoulder, his senses alert, as always. They had changed their apartment again last month. New street, new building, new neighbors. But Emily could feel it, the same oppressive attention she had learned to recognize. Ethan tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, someone is near the fire escape." Emily glanced up. A man in a dark coat, face partially hidden, lingered at the edge of the building next door. He didn't move, didn't approach, just watched. Emily's stomach dropped. "They found us," she whispered. Ethan's hand squeezed hers. "Not yet," he said calmly. "But they're learning. They'll make a mistake." That night, Emily triple-locked the apartment doors, drew the curtains tight, and set Ethan's bed near the window, watching the street below. "You're always prepared," Emily said softly. "I notice patterns," Ethan replied. People repeat mistakes. I know when to move. Emily's heart ached with pride and fear. Her little boy was extraordinary, and he knew it. Across Greenwich, Margaret Harrington was orchestrating her plan. Time to escalate, she said, flipping through the folder with photos of Ethan, Emily, and their routines. Richard looked uneasy. You're sending someone to confront them? Now? Margaret's eyes were cold fire. Not confront. Observe, learn, manipulate. A man named Victor Kane, a Harrington private investigator, was briefed. His task: infiltrate their neighborhood, find weaknesses, and report everything back. Margaret smiled. Patience, Richard. The boy will reveal himself, and when he does, we'll know exactly how to act. 2 nights later, Victor followed Emily and Ethan as they returned from a grocery store. Ethan noticed immediately. Mom, he said calmly, the man with the briefcase. He's new. He doesn't know me yet. Emily's hand went to her mouth. How can you tell? Ethan's eyes narrowed, scanning the man's posture, the rhythm of his footsteps, the hesitation in his gaze. He's calculating, but inexperienced. He's trying to intimidate, not harm. He underestimates me. Victor watched the boy from a distance, noting his intense awareness. This kid is different, he muttered into his phone. That evening, Victor left a package at Emily's door. Emily found it when she returned. Inside, a single note written in elegant Harrington script. We are always watching. Be careful. Emily's hands shook. She tucked it away immediately. Ethan read the note over her shoulder. They want to scare us, he said. They're weak in strategy, strong in resources. We can prepare. Emily frowned. Prepare how? Ethan's eyes glimmered. I know things before they happen. We set traps. We observe. We respond. They won't touch us. Emily pressed a hand to her chest. You're only 8. I'm enough, he said firmly. Over the next week, Victor tried several subtle intrusions. A van parked outside their building for hours, recording. Small gifts left in the lobby, with tracking devices hidden. Calls to Emily's phone from numbers she didn't recognize. Each time, Ethan noticed immediately. Each time, he thwarted the attempt before Emily even realized what had happened. Emily began to see the full scope. Her son wasn't just extraordinary. He was a step ahead of the Harringtons. And with every intrusion, Ethan's confidence and abilities grew. Finally, Victor reported back. The child is not normal, observes everything, anticipates every move. I can't approach without being noticed. Margaret's face darkened. Then escalate indirectly. Make them dependent on us. Test their limits. The boy will slip. Emily, meanwhile, spent evenings quietly teaching Ethan self-defense, situational awareness, and strategy. She never called it training, it was survival. Ethan's abilities, combined with Emily's guidance, made them invisible and untouchable. But Emily knew one thing: the Harringtons were patient. And patience with them always came at a price. The early morning sun in New Haven streamed through the apartment windows, but Emily felt no warmth. Her stomach churned as she noticed a delivery van parked too close to the building. Ethan, perched by the window, didn't need to ask. They're back, he said quietly, watching every exit, every entrance. Emily's heart sank. How do they keep finding us? They don't, Ethan replied. They think they do, but I notice patterns. Emily stared at her son, awed and terrified. 8 years old, and you're already planning countermeasures? Ethan's gaze was steady. We survive by noticing, by anticipating. They won't touch us unless I allow it. Across the country, Margaret Harrington was orchestrating her most aggressive move yet. Richard, she said, pacing her study. Victor Kane reports they've begun evading us completely. But Emily is getting complacent. It's time we destabilize her. Richard frowned. We invade her life directly? Margaret's lips curled into a sharp smile. Indirectly. Cut her off from work, friends, money, force her hand. She will come out. And when she does, we take what is ours. The first attack came subtly. Emily arrived at the diner to find her hours cut. Her manager said the corporate office had adjusted schedules due to budget constraints. Emily knew better. Victor had influenced it, creating financial pressure, a silent squeeze. Ethan noticed immediately. "Mom," he said, "they want to see fear. They want to see you break. But we won't." Emily forced a smile. "You're right. We adapt." The next intrusion was more personal. A woman knocked on their apartment door claiming to be from child services, citing a report about an unfit environment. Emily's pulse spiked. "They're trying to scare me," she muttered. Ethan walked calmly to the door. "You are not welcome here," he said firmly. The woman froze, unnerved by his composure. Emily felt a swell of pride. "Ethan," he shrugged. "They always hesitate when they underestimate me." Over the next few weeks, Harrington's escalated. Bank freezes on Emily's accounts, reversed after quick explanations. Anonymous threats mailed to their apartment. Surveillance attempts near Ethan's school. Each time, Ethan noticed before Emily did. One evening, Emily whispered, "Sweetheart, I'm scared." Ethan placed a small hand on her cheek. "Mom, they see us. But they don't see me, not fully, not yet." Emily nodded, realizing the truth. Her son was not only protecting himself, he was protecting her. Margaret Harrington, watching from her mansion, grew frustrated. "They're too careful," she said. "But patience is the Harrington way. Wait, the boy will slip." Richard shook his head. "What if he never slips?" Margaret's gaze hardened. "Then we escalate. And that's when Emily will realize the child is the key." Meanwhile, Emily began strategic preparations of her own. Routes to school and grocery stores were rotated daily. Every visitor was screened, small security cameras hidden in plain sight. Ethan even began predicting patterns in the Harringtons' attempts, noting where their agents might appear, and warning his mother in advance. Emily realized something incredible. Her son, the boy who had been cast out, was now their shield and their reckoning. That night, as Emily tucked Ethan into bed, he looked at her with unusual seriousness. "Mom, one day soon they'll come too close, and when they do, we won't run. We won't hide. They will regret underestimating us." Emily felt her chest tighten. "Yes," she whispered. "We won't." Outside, the world continued, unaware of the quiet war brewing in a small New Haven apartment. Inside, Emily and Ethan were preparing for the storm that was coming. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain. Emily and Ethan walked home from the library, a quiet energy in the streets of New Haven. But tonight, the calm was deceptive. Ethan slowed, his eyes scanning every shadow. "Mom, they're here," he whispered. Emily froze. She followed his gaze to the dark SUV parked at the corner. The tinted windows reflected nothing, but she could feel the intent inside. "They want us," she murmured, her pulse quickening. Ethan smiled faintly. "Not yet, but soon. They don't know what's coming." Inside the SUV, Margaret Harrington watched through night vision binoculars. "Victor Kane," she said coldly. "Report." Victor, tense, spoke into his earpiece. "They're unaware. Apartment secured. They've altered routines, but the boy, he's aware. Extremely aware." Margaret's lips curved in a thin smile. "Good. Let's see how aware he is when we press the pressure." Tonight we begin direct engagement. Back in the apartment, Emily sensed the tension rising. "Ethan, stay close," she said quietly. He nodded. "Mom, we need to be ready for them to make a mistake. They always do." Emily's gaze softened. "You're more than ready. You're extraordinary." Ethan's small hands clenched into fists. "I'll show them. I'll protect you. And one day, they will regret everything." Margaret's plan was simple but daring. She sent a Harrington agent directly to the apartment to test Emily's reaction. The agent knocked lightly. Emily froze, recognizing the gesture as abnormal. Ethan stepped forward calmly. "Leave now," he said, voice firm and steady. The agent hesitated, unnerved by the child's composure, then backed away. Emily's eyes widened. "Ethan, how? I know him. I've watched everything." "We're not afraid," Victor Kane reported back immediately. "The boy, he's not just aware, he's anticipating every move. He's exceptional." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Then escalate. They will be forced to reveal themselves." That's when the real game begins. The next night, a power outage hit the neighborhood, carefully orchestrated by Harrington tech agents. Emily guided Ethan through the darkness, flashlight in hand. "They want fear," she whispered. "Don't give it to them." Ethan shook his head. "No, we control the situation. Watch." Through the darkened streets, Ethan led them safely through alternate routes, avoiding agents stationed outside, predicting their movements with almost supernatural precision. Emily could barely keep up, astonished. "You're amazing," she said breathlessly. Ethan's eyes glowed with focus. "I learned from the best. I learned from you." Finally, Harrington's direct confrontation came, not through threats but through the media and public sphere. The next morning, news outlets reported. Local woman accused of financial irregularities. Harrington connections suspected. Emily sat stunned. Ethan calmly pointed out the patterns in the article, showing her how the information had been manipulated. "They're testing reactions," he said, "but they don't know me. We respond carefully." Emily realized that for the first time they were outplayed. Every move Harrington's made was anticipated and countered by her son. That night, Emily tucked Ethan into bed. "Tomorrow, they will try something bigger," she said softly. Ethan smiled. "Then we'll be ready. They will regret underestimating us. And Mom will return. One day, we'll return to Harrington Estate, and nothing will be the same." Emily pressed her forehead to his. "Yes," she whispered, "and when that day comes, we'll do it together." Outside, the Harrington mansion gleamed in the distance, unaware that the storm they had begun to unleash was already inside their own empire, watching, learning, and preparing. Spring had deepened into early summer. Emily Carter stood on the outskirts of Greenwich, gazing at the sprawling Harrington estate, the same mansion that had once cast her and her unborn child out into the cold. Ethan, now 9, held her hand tightly. His eyes scanned the estate like a general surveying a battlefield. "Mom," he said softly, "we're ready." Emily nodded, heart pounding. "Yes, we're ready." Inside the mansion, Margaret Harrington was entertaining a gala. Wealth, power, and influence glittered in the grand ballroom. Richard whispered nervously. "They've been quiet," he said. "Too quiet." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Patience, Richard. They're preparing. But they don't know we've grown stronger, too." Little did she know, the strength she feared most was already inside her own empire, a boy who had learned, observed, and anticipated everything she thought she controlled. That evening, Emily and Ethan entered the estate, not through gates or doors, but through the hidden service entrance, discovered through months of observation. Emily whispered, "Remember, Ethan, no mistakes. Stay calm." Ethan nodded, stepping ahead like a shadow. Every camera, every guard, every obstacle, he anticipated, bypassed, or neutralized silently. Margaret, observing from the study balcony, narrowed her eyes. "Victor, report." Victor's voice trembled over the phone. They're inside. I don't understand how." Margaret's hand clenched the railing. Impossible. Inside, the grand hall shimmered under crystal chandeliers. Emily stepped forward, holding her head high. Ethan followed, small but unshakable. Margaret appeared from the shadows, her elegant gown rustling, eyes cold. "Emily Carter," she said, voice like ice. "I warned you to stay away." Emily's gaze was steady. "You cast me out once, Margaret. You humiliated me. You tried to erase my child, but we're here now, and nothing you do will change that." Ethan stepped forward, his small frame radiating a calm intensity that made the adults around him uneasy. "You underestimated me," he said simply. Then it began, the confrontation. Margaret lunged for dominance, hurling accusations, threats, and insults. Richard tried to intervene, but Ethan, with an awareness beyond his years, anticipated every movement, every gesture. He guided Emily through the chaos, avoiding traps and countering Harrington manipulations with precision and intelligence that seemed almost supernatural. Margaret's composure faltered for the first time. "This child," she whispered, "he's not ordinary." Ethan looked at her with unflinching eyes. "No, Margaret, I am not ordinary, and I won't let you harm my family or anyone I care about." What followed was swift and silent justice. Emily confronted Margaret with the financial and legal records she had preserved for years, proving every manipulation. Ethan revealed how he had documented every Harrington move, every attempt to intimidate or manipulate them. The mansion's staff, long aware of Harrington cruelty, began to side with Emily, opening doors, restricting Margaret's influence. By the end of the night, Harringtons realized the tables had turned completely. Emily stood in the grand hall, holding Ethan close. "You see, Mom," Ethan whispered, "everything we endured prepared us for this moment." Emily smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart, and we did it together." Margaret Harrington finally felt the weight of her arrogance. The woman who had once ruled the Harrington empire with cruelty now faced the consequences of underestimating those she tried to destroy. Richard looked at Emily, defeated. "Perhaps we were wrong," he muttered. Emily shook her head. "It's not about being right. It's about protecting what matters." As dawn broke over the estate, Emily and Ethan stood on the grand balcony, looking out over the lawns and fountains. Ethan's small hand rested in hers. "We came back," he said softly. "Yes," Emily replied. "And we're finally home, but this time on our terms." Outside, the Harrington mansion gleamed, untouched by the years, but inside, it had changed forever. The cast-out had returned, stronger, wiser, unstoppable. And for the first time, Emily knew nothing could ever break them again.